Live from Brussels and Buenos Aires, it's ZN Live. And today I'm very excited because this is episode 397. I am Phil Weiss, CEO and founder of ZN. My co-host today is Julie, who is an expert in travel, in tourism, in institutional communication, as well as sustainability. And our guest today is Daria Delnevo. She is a communication and network manager at CSR Europe. She's actually got an experience in different areas, from journalism to corporate sustainability, international relations, and much, much more. So very happy to have you on the show today. And Daria, I want to start with a question about CSR. CSR was a big topic in the last decade. A lot of companies made this a big priority. We can fairly say that the world has changed in the last couple of years. You know, we've had COVID, we've had wars. Has this thrown CSR off the agenda? How important is it today, and has things changed?
Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Julie, for having me with you today at this podcast. Well, I have to say that sustainability has become a mainstream. CSR Europe, when we first started off, we really had to fight hard, to make it relevant for European policymakers. We were really advocating for corporate sustainability, social responsibility, and that battle has been won to a certain degree because with the von der Leyen Commission last year, in the last 4 years. They really built an impressive sustainability architecture. Sustainability has become a mainstream, and I think now what we are witnessing also with the election, after the elections of this year, is a shift towards competitiveness, because sustainability is for Europe a way to really become competitive vis-a-vis the great powers that are competing on the international scene, the US, China. So sustainability, if you will, it's Europe's way to find this competitive its competitive edge on the international scene. And so, there was quite the transition that we are really also excited as an organization to see, because we are really trying to, how can I say, I try to see. Apologies. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Apologies. So as I was saying, we've seen this shift, and we are looking forward to see how this commissioner designate will then implement their mission statement to try to dialogue with businesses and making their voice heard and included in the implementation of this sustainability framework.
So when you meet somebody who doesn't work in the EU and who says, and who hasn't got a kind of background in this space, and they ask you, what is CSR? I mean, what is it, and what does it cover? Because it sounds like a very vague term that could be a lot of different things. So how do you answer that question when you're at a barbecue or a Christmas dinner and you're asked, what exactly do you do?
I see sustainability kind of like an umbrella organization, a catch-all term that includes what maybe it's more used in America as ESG, so the environmental, the social, and the governance aspect of companies' actions, and so it's more like a catch-all phrase, let's say. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it definitely does. And Daria, given the fact that it's such a catch-all phrase, how do you manage to be able to communicate about all of the different things that CSR entails? How do you make sure that every topic, every issue that falls under CSR is effectively communicated about? What is your approach? What are your practices? And how do you manage to do that?
I think as a communication practitioner, what is really important is to really let's say keep on learning, because there are so many new regulations that came out over the last 4 years that completely reshaped Europe's corporate framework, from the CSRD to the CSR Triple D, the standards. As practitioners, we had to learn the language to be able to then dialogue and inform multinational corporations about the impact of those regulations. So the first thing is really to be willing to learn and understand a new language if you really want to be able to communicate effectively. And then I think, in general, when you talk about sustainability, we need to keep into consideration that sustainability initially didn't even have a reference point within multinational companies. There was no chief sustainability officers. Nowadays, you still sometimes don't have CSOs. You have an ESG director. You have different types of job titles, but more and more regulations are making it impossible to just have, let's say, sustainability as a reference point for one single person within the organization. Sustainability is impacting the finance team. Sustainability is impacting the HR team. Is impacting the communication team. Soon in 2026, we're going to have the Green Claim Directive that will kind of also pose quite significant challenges also for communications teams within multinational companies. So I think you need to be able to adapt, know your language, know the language of the legislations, but try to make it your own so that you can actually target different groups within companies.
Now, talking about you talked about the messaging. Now, what about the channels? We've been discussing the EU influencer event and online. What the main challenge channels and challenges are for communicators. A lot of people were discussing whether or not to use X, Twitter as a channel, given the toxicity of the channel, the issues around it. So what are your views on this? And I also believe that you're very focused on your web communication. So tell me a little bit about what are your thoughts on channels and where are you focused right now?
So CSR Europe is a business network and is also a business network leading the proactive voice of businesses who wants to engage in sustainability. So our key stakeholders are businesses on one hand and European policymakers on the other. As such, I would say the first important channel of communication is your website. The website is your own space. You can customize it, the design, the content, the functionality, to really thoroughly represent your brand, your values, your goal as an organization. But on social media, when it comes to social media, and you were referencing X. As an organization, as CSR Europe, we decided to opt out of the platform because of the constant changes that Musk's implemented over the course, since he took over the leadership of the company. But I think it's still a relevant platform where policymakers are still invested in. The feeling is that they prefer to still continue to engage in the platform, trying to push for more transparency over data regulation and how the platform is managing sensitive content. Fake news, but as an organization, we pull out. We are mainly focusing on LinkedIn, where we are targeting, of course, businesses.
Yeah, we've seen a big shift towards LinkedIn this year. I mean, it's been happening in the background. In the event, we had the vast majority of people there who were spending most of their time on LinkedIn. However, in our research, we found that MEPs were still actually prioritizing X, and we've also seen in the news cycle that policymakers, commissioners, and journalists are still using X as the default. Now, this was something that Teresa Fallon, one of the guests at EU Influencer, was calling path dependency, which means very difficult to change your behavior when things have been in the same space for so long. But there is a very interesting change that you mentioned, and I think we are seeing people thinking very seriously about whether to continue and how to kind of free themselves from that dependency. And we've of course seen LinkedIn grow. There are other channels that we talked about in the event, which were Instagram and TikTok, going to a different audience. In fact, we've seen people not only approaching the channels, but also the tone of the communication, like video, fun, friendly. Are you thinking about these other channels as well, or is it just all focused on LinkedIn?
Being more B2B, LinkedIn will remain the primary platform in which we are going to operate. But indeed, I also seen also a transition within the content that LinkedIn has put out in the last couple of years, because they also there has been a shift also within the platform where before we saw so many more static images accompanying posts. And now it's mainly, you see still GIFs, short clips, and videos being implemented in there as well. Now I've seen that sometimes they also try to adopt, let's say, some more interactive features. At some point, LinkedIn had published stories or stories-like features, but then again, all these features got discontinued, and it remained a platform that is supporting still video content, but maybe yes, less customers oriented than TikTok and other platforms that are more targeting maybe also younger audiences as well.
Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing we had, the influencers we recognized on TikTok and Instagram were talking about climate change, Green Deal issues. So I suspect that there is a lot of resonance for CSR-related conversations on these new platforms. And in fact, the people that we were looking at were kind of really engaging young people on these topics, which were EU topics, seen as a bit maybe difficult to understand, a bit boring, and turning them into really interesting conversations. So I think there's something there that's quite interesting to consider. And I suspect that in the next year or two, we're going to see more of these so-called serious conversations taking place on these alternative platforms. But you mentioned the website. I think it's really interesting that people are actually refocusing on websites. We've had a lot of web projects in the last year or two. So redoing, refreshing, and because the tools have improved a lot, so you can do better websites with a lot of the platforms like WordPress, etc. And I think that having the key pillars, so website, newsletter, emailing list, these are things that are a bit boring because they've been there forever, but doing that right is really challenging. So have you got a kind of clear strategy on your website, emailing, newsletter, and kind of editorial content?
Yeah, of course, indeed. I think the website is an absolute key. As I was saying before, it's a space where you can really truly reflect your brand identity, and if you are a bit data oriented as a communication person, then you would spend some time also setting up a bit like, your search engine optimization strategy, so that you can actually benefit from a more sustainable long-term visibility versus the visibility that you get on a social media platform where your content is subjected to the changes of algorithms that define whether it will fail or have a success. So I think it's definitely important to spend time to develop quite a good content strategy to ensure that you have really metadata figured out. You know where people are finding you, what are the keywords that people are using on search engines to find your organization, your services, and your activities, and really try to leverage them, integrate them in the content that you use to include on the web page. Make sure, super important, I think, is to build a customer's journey that starts from the website, and that you have to continue though to feed. How do you do that? With email marketing. Yeah, as you rightly pointed out, it's been around there for ages, but it's become even more key in really bringing, feeding people back to your audience, understanding what are the buttons they're clicking on their website, what are the documents that they're accessing. And of course, being GDPR compliant, because you do not want to collect data not inappropriately, but try to collect the data that you can in a smart and use it in a smart way to direct then your marketing emails.
Yeah, and there was a big fear that GDPR would make things very, very complicated. I think people now are comfortable if you just follow a few steps and make sure you've done things correctly. But I'm just always amazed at how powerful email is, and just sending out emails just works. Now you need to write relevant content. You need to check what you're getting. You need to decide on, you can't go crazy and send too many emails, but it really gets people to respond. So I think that's surprising.
And I think, in the field of sustainability, at least when it comes to CSR Europe, as an organization, we are tackling many topics. And there are organizations that are more topic-oriented. I don't know, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is focusing primarily on circularity. The CSR Europe, we contributed to create the Pact for Youth that led to the creation of Erasmus Pro. So that was for vet training. But we're also involved in supporting members and improving their supply chain sustainability, human rights due diligence, biodiversity. So what is also very important as well is that all the topics that you are addressing as an organization are then have their own customer journey. Like you can, it's very important that you're able to segment your audience so that, you do not talk about human rights to people that are focused primarily on diversity and inclusion and vice versa.
Yeah, no, I think doing that is quite complex, and you need to segment your database. You need to know which topics are there, and then you need to segment it on behavior, which I think takes some real structure and the right tools to do it. Now, you mentioned before the SEO, the websites and creating SEO. I think that's indeed quite important. One new element that we've seen is actually a kind of AI form of SEO, meaning that people don't go to the web anymore. They go to ChatGPT or to Gemini and they say, what is the best agency for communication in Brussels? And, gradually getting found in there has become equally important. So I think people are beginning to see this as a new tool for doing this. Now I want to come back to the conversation and strategy that you have. You do quite a few events, I believe, and I think that the challenge for events, especially in Brussels and around, is to make sure that the events are not standalone. We've been, doing the EU influencer event, which I mentioned, and we spent a lot of time trying to take a story in the room and put it online. What is your approach to events and kind of how to combine online and in the room?
First things first, you really need to try to cluster, as you said, like different engagement opportunities for different groups of stakeholders to make their traveling worth their while. What we've seen also from a lot of companies is that after COVID, they're still having travel bans. So it's really it's harder to bring relevant stakeholders to Brussels, at least those that are not already here. And so the first thing you have to do is really trying to also cluster the activities, the networking opportunities that you're going to have at the event. For instance, this year CSR Europe hosted the European Sustainable Industry Summit. It was quite a big event, and within that event, besides the more traditional, let's say, plenaries and roundtable sessions, we also had several important kickoff meetings. We actually launched the first European Chief Sustainability Officers Network. This is a network that is going to actually bring together the CSOs of corporate members and equivalent functions who have received a mandate from their board to implement a sustainability strategy, and bring them in dialogue with their peers to understand how they can learn and how they can learn best practices, share challenges, and also solutions that they are already implementing within their companies. So that was an important, let's say, side event. But we also brought together in a workshop all the sustainability business networks that are based within the 28 member states of Europe, in Brussels, for a deep dive on best practices on different topics, from how do you do membership retention, how do you grow your membership base. So all these side events clustered with a very interesting program, I would dare to say, in which we mixed more traditional sustainability topics with innovative ones. We had the second day that was entirely dedicated to business cases on corporate sustainability and AI. So AI and the role it has made it possible to have quite a good attendance from companies. We reached around 300 attendees in person, which was beyond what we had originally imagined, let's say.
You caught my attention by saying, that you had a session related to AI in CSR, and I'm just curious to hear what are some of the trends that you're seeing here when it comes to AI and CSR. How is it playing a role in CSR, and what are maybe your? I mean, you obviously don't have a glass ball; you can't see into the future. But what are some things that you anticipate will come out of that in the years to come?
I think the first reaction was that the people we are speaking with, usually the people we are engaging, are in the sustainability field, and let's say they've been quite overwhelmed with the amount of regulations that came out their way. We called it that tsunami of regulations that they had to face on a daily basis in their work. That they were interested in the topics, but at the same time it was still not perceived as a top priority to really tackle now this year, because right now the big focus is on compliance, on reporting, sustainability reporting, the European Sustainable Reporting Standards. How can they really be compliant? So towards AI, there was interest. So they were happy to see and listen what some companies are already implementing. But at the same time, there was also the not a reluctance, but they had to take a pause, because they're really quite overwhelmed with the requests that they're getting already from their CEOs. So that was more or less the reaction there.
That's very interesting. I think, today you can't have a conference without an AI slot. It's just not possible. I think it is part of a hype cycle. However, going back to your point, I think that it can be used for all sorts of practical things, including, summarizing legislation and saying, well, look, I don't have time to read all these things. Give me the top line, and then you can decide to dive deep. So it's a very useful tool. Now, with all these changes that you mentioned, when you meet young people who want to start in communication, what is your kind of one piece of advice to them? What's the most important thing you'd like to tell them?
I think it's important to stay curious. You need to stay curious and open about the different channels that are coming your way. Especially when it comes to AI, it's every day there is something new. So if you're not staying curious, you will miss out the opportunity to actually pick up on the tools that can actually facilitate your work. And don't be too scared to try them out either, because it's sometimes you can be tempted to stay with the familiar, but then again, you could miss out on the opportunity to engage with a tool that can facilitate your work much more.
Yeah, I think that's a good message for your colleagues who were at the AI workshop. It's like, it might not be a priority, but maybe you should try. I really think it is quite difficult to figure out exactly how to use it and how to build it in your workflow. I think it takes quite a bit of trial and error, but I also, once you start seeing what it can do, I think it's got amazing possibilities to accelerate the work that you do. So now let's jump to our recommendations. So roll jingle. So Daria, what are your recommendations for our viewers and listeners this week?
So I would say that comms-wise, because I'm wearing two hats, communications and sustainability. Comms-wise, I would invite people maybe to follow two communicators, two great communicators, at least in my opinion. Dan Sobowitz, he was actually a speechwriter for the Vice President Maros Sefcovic a couple of legislations ago. And he's always sharing great tips. And the other one is a fellow countryman. I'm Italian, so I cannot not mention a great communicator coming from my country, and that is Marco Ricorda, who I think was also featured within your ZN influencers list. And if I can add one more recommendation, also sustainability related, is the book Material World by Ed Conway. It's a great way to understand how our daily life is really would not be possible without key materials that are located in strategic places on Earth, and that the Europe is trying to get their hands on, and together with China and the US. So pretty cool reading.
Fantastic. And yes, we do know Marco Ricordi. He was a guest on ZN Live, and he posted also about the EU influencer event. He's on the list as well. Julie, what are your recommendations this week?
Yes, so my recommendation is actually a LinkedIn page. It's called Famous Campaigns, and as is in the name, it basically showcases famous campaigns from different organizations, different companies, and the interesting thing about this page is that usually the campaigns are very creative. They're very thought-provoking, very intriguing. So in terms of, marketing and getting your creative juices flowing, I think it's a super, super interesting page to follow. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Fantastic. And my recommendation is a podcast called The Rest is Money, and it's a specific topic on the economics of happiness, with a discussion with an expert on, how do you measure happiness at a company, at a country's level, but of course, what does it mean for people to experience well-being? How do you measure it, and why it matters in economic policy and strategy? So not just, what's the revenue, but also what is the well-being of a country. And that is all we have time for. Have a fantastic weekend. Daria, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you online, and have a great weekend, hopefully in a nice sunny place, I think, Julie, in Argentina. And the rest of us in Brussels. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.